After not having crossed it for a couple of years due to a global quarantine, I was surprised one day to find that an old local shortcut I used to take almost every night had been turned into an actual real deal road. A humble dirt path behind an abandoned grocery store formed by nothing more than the relentless desire of myself and others to find a faster way up this overpass suddenly was validated. It evolved into its final form, a proper street fit with traffic lights and all. And all I could think about while I sat there dumbfounded at this intersection, one that from my perspective just materialized from one day to the next, was, well, a certain prolific game designer's new studio's debut title, 2019's Death Stranding, aka Norman Reedus and the Freaky Fetus. This is kind of a hard story to tell, so I spoiled myself and got a new little toy to help with it. This is what you call stolen valor, or, constructing a narrative. I've never done this stuff before, so sorry in advance.
It feels like there are two distinct games within Death Stranding. One is the game you play, the addictive core loop of deliveries. You take on the role of an uncharismatic and antisocial mailman, optimizing your routes and delivering cargo to the front doors of few and far between denizens of a post-cataclysmic America, all the while engaging asynchronously with other so-called porters, other players, never directly in contact, but aiding each other along your collective journey by leaving supplies and resources behind. The second is the game that keeps interjecting itself into the fun, sometimes with so little grace it's infuriating. Oh, sorry, you enjoying yourself? You in the middle of something? Well, too bad. Time to be teleported to a parallel dimension for a boss fight that straight up doesn't matter because, hey, we blew half our budget on Mads Mikkelsen and he needs the screen time. It's the side of the game so caught up in celebrity guest appearances it's willing to stop you in your tracks to shove them in your face, a result of its now renowned game director, Hideo Kojima's newfound recognition within mainstream Hollywood. Yet it trips over itself, unable to bear the weight of its self-seriousness amidst its director's penchant for ham-fisting bullshit into his worlds. The amount of cringeworthy puns written into the script would be enough to drive a player to the brink of uninstallation, were it not for the game's first part.
If you could carve out the unnecessary fat from Death Stranding, you'd be left with one of the most innovative and pure games of the last generation. But that'll never happen because it's literally illegal, and we'll get to why in a bit.
I know how dumb this sounds, but Death Stranding fundamentally changed the way I perceive the world. In gamifying something as essential to our way of life as the delivery of commodities, it forces you to think about how things are made, used, and discarded, and of your own role within the cycle of consumerism.
I mean, okay, not to give it all the credit, its release also coincided with two big changes, for me at least. Personally, I had just started my first ever material job. What I mean is that, as a software developer, I had previously only worked in industries that provided services to people. Shortly before the game's release, I decided to switch jobs and work somewhere more, well, like I said, material. I worked at a fashion company with an ethical consumption and sustainability mission, so the topics of material sourcing, degradation, and the lasting impacts of manufacturing and transport were ever on my mind. And as strange world events quickly unfolded, the viability of consumption of the things which my livelihood depended on people consuming were thrust into the forefront of my thoughts.
The pandemic was the other change. In what many have already compared to a prophecy, the real world that received Kojima's latest game began looking a lot like the fictional one depicted within it. I, and assumably you, played a game about delivering necessities to disconnected, quarantined underground shelterers whose only interactions with the outside world were holographic, while ourselves sheltering indoors from a dangerous airborne illness and connecting with society through Zoom calls, online grocery ordering portals, and social media. Except for its relentlessness in attempting to get me to care about whatever the fuck Hannibal Lecter was going on about in his piss tank flashbacks, Death Stranding and the world it was ushered into were exceptional for their forced tranquility, leaving space for reflection. Hell, this was a game that incentivized recycling, including your literal piss and shit and blood to manufacture weapons and gear. And we were playing in a time where companies in the real world were cutting corners every way they could to keep supply chains stable. I remember when they stopped printing regular labels so that essentials like flour and salt could be shipped out faster. Outside, toilet paper and hand sanitizer were being stockpiled. The pace of the world slowed down to a crawl. Just like in the game, even shitting couldn't be taken for granted. Death Stranding, or at least the delivery part of it, is also about interconnectedness. And what I mean is that it puts its money where its mouth is. Death Stranding demonstrates, via its gameplay more so than its narrative, that through social connections and collaboration, humankind can overcome the challenges of even the worst possible calamity. We as players fill the role of so-called Homo Ludens, the next evolutionary step for mankind, according to Kojima. People who play, who find enjoyment in the mundane, who actually like this literal walking simulator. But as boring as that sounds, what makes it work is that interconnectedness. The fact that despite never encountering a single other living soul across the countless horizons you'd vault, you're never entirely alone. Death Stranding is an asynchronous multiplayer game, meaning rather than occupy the same world at the same time, players each inhabit their own instance of it, but stumble across the signs of life of each other. Let me give you an example. You're navigating a difficult mountain when suddenly you see an anchor wedged into the rock with a rope. In any other game, you'd attribute this to its designers tempting you, akin to platformers that entice you down certain paths by laying out sequences of coins and other collectibles. In this game, however, every rope, every ladder, every stray cargo container, vehicle, or even larger piece of infrastructure, everything was left behind by someone else. This is here because someone placed this anchor here and rappelled down, and now you can too. The traces we leave in Death Stranding go further than just the material, though. The physical things we abandon in the environment left to deteriorate. No, some traces are more subtle, the kinds that are made not immediately, but accumulate gradually over time.
The main verb in Death Stranding is to walk, but the game very cleverly overlays analytics technology onto this verb, tying the solitary act of marching to its theme of interconnectedness, and making every step count, turning walking into a form of communication.
Desire paths are a natural occurring phenomenon caused by human and other animals' behavior. They form when the same ground is retread over and over again, whether out of habit or for convenience. They stand out especially when surrounded by human infrastructure, as desire paths tend to call attention to poorly designed man-made spaces. You've probably seen them around your neighborhood, your school, your work. You often find them around bends and sidewalks. People's collective need to speed up their route progressively tramples the grass into nothing, leaving clear dirt patches. You see them in public spaces already meant to be traversed, where intended routes have already been clearly laid out by urban planners, but where democratic foot traffic uncovers its bottlenecks, displaying signs of overuse or abuse of certain areas. There's an evolutionary advantage too. Presented with two choices, animals are likely to take one they know is highly trafficked, given that many have evidently gone that way before and survived.
I think urban and suburban desire paths are really valuable. They reveal how we actually choose to move through spaces, in spite sometimes of explicit intended routes laid out for us by designers with the goal of funneling us through certain ways. Death Stranding, the video game, has desire paths, and nobody knew that until after they started appearing.
In the days and weeks after launch, players started noticing something strange. The world's once treacherous landscapes, filled densely by obstacles and all manner of tripping hazard, began to be split by what looked like rough, patchy dirt roads. These were different than the game's other road, the one that had asked players to commit to slowly building over the course of their entire playthrough. Unlike that road, or highway, whose trail was predetermined and plotted by the game's designers to cross the entire map, trivializing most of the game, these roads were, well, sketchy. They were jagged, less well-defined, but useful, and just about everywhere they showed up, they changed the landscape. Strangely, they didn't seem sanctioned by the game's developers in the same way that the highway was. These footpaths were not so much man-made as they were people-made. It turns out that behind the scenes, the game was effectively tracking every single step taken by every single player and feeding it to their back-end analytics pipeline. There, a player activity tracking service superimposed this data onto the world and generated a heat map, a layer representing hotbeds of player engagement, the spots where they were most likely to stand, to walk, to go. Finally, this information was fed back to the game client itself, which rendered these virtual desire paths along the lines of player activity. Upon loading the game, your instance would ask the server, "Hey, where's everyone been walking?" The server would provide information about player behavior, and your game would update itself to reflect the latest trends.
In English, that meant if you, me, your mom, and your dad all played Death Stranding individually and happened to walk down the same specific path, each on our own time and in our own world, then the game would register that and start slowly building a dirt road there, as if plotted by our foot traffic. When your grandma shows up a week later, she'd see a path already made for her, and in taking it, dig it even deeper for the next guy. What's funny to me is that desire paths in the real world are already a kind of analog heat map. They depict exactly the places in which people are most likely to walk, because the act of walking forms the path. But more than that, once partially formed, they encourage others to finish them.
I live somewhere where it's really cold half the year, and as exhausting as it is to walk through thick, uncompressed snow, we all still do it. The ground gives you no resistance, so it's a struggle to raise your leg for each new step. Yet, the more you and others take the same path and repeatedly apply the force of your collective weight to the snow below, the thicker it becomes, to the point that a natural, hard, easier footpath emerges. Even in the early stages of winter, when only partially formed paths exist, it's always less effort to retrace someone else's steps than to take new ones yourself. And so, the mere inception of a path determines its own completion. As I said, there's also an evolutionary angle, which emerged within Death Stranding. The reason we and other animals follow desire paths is that they're not just a way for us to make our own traversal easier, they're also a form of communication. When you, me, your mom, your dad, or a deer out in the woods come across a path clearly laid out over time by the walks of others of our same species, the message is clear. Hey buddy, there's a faster route to your destination. Not only that, but we can infer that this faster route is also safer, given its continuous use. Such a deeply trodden path wouldn't exist if it crossed a bear's den, for instance.
Moreover, when the traveler doesn't actually know where they're going, desire paths signal something else. Hey buddy, there's something we think is worth your while over here. For deer, that might be a watering hole. For people, maybe a hidden bus stop. In Death Stranding, a point of interest.
Multiple times over my playthrough, I noticed upcoming points of interest being spoiled. I mean, the game very sneakily hides some of them, so this sort of asynchronous cooperation between players was probably intended, but often I'd stumble upon a dirt road and think to myself, oh, well, there's probably an outpost here or something. There's gotta be a compelling reason so many people have gone this way. Then I'd turn a bend and boom, there it was. It's like how Uranus's orbit gave away Neptune, you know? The punch of discovery just kept getting stolen. Something very similar happens in Dark Souls whenever you come across a sign in a difficult-to-reach place. What the message itself says isn't as important as what its presence communicates, that this spot, however difficult, is reachable, because it just has to be if someone scrawled something here. In terms of gameplay, desire paths don't only indicate, democratically voted most efficient routes between points of interest, they also suggest or hint or reveal the existence of those valuable destinations ahead of time. In a way, these dynamic, community-driven desire paths allow players to collaboratively unlock an easy mode, mirroring real life. The more players tread the same route, the clearer it becomes and the less obstacles are rendered along its path, in the same way that real-world footpaths through snow or grass become more defined and easier to step through the more they're taken.
As one of Death Stranding's early players, what I experienced was a raw, untouched, undeveloped landscape, the most challenging possible version of the game that ever existed. Players joining months later, though, found themselves in an already routed world, one full of signs and infrastructure and paths drawn into the landscape by the countless steps of adventurers who'd come first, each one marking the world with their own version of an "I was here." Arguably, this made their experience easier, less rocks to trip over, However, and I can't decide whether or not I think this is cool, but players don't actually need a network connection to experience the desire paths. A single dedicated enough player can independently create their own roads. I know this because a few years ago I committed myself to unlocking the game's Santa hat over the holidays. To do that, I needed to gain the favor of a specific recipient, which meant repeatedly making deliveries to this guy up in the mountains where no roads already existed. A pain in my ass, let me tell you. After a couple of repeated deliveries, though, I started noticing the ground iteratively clear itself, and before I knew it, I had made a rudimentary path up the hill, all on my own without the intervention of any other players. And while I don't know if I like that a disconnected player can still tread paths like this, it did convince me that this is a good mechanic. It's easy to imagine a critique of the game's fairness, calling out the use of left-behind roads and infrastructure cheating. But the point here is that these roads only form after players either collectively or independently prove their ability to make deliveries without solid footing. The trodden paths aren't just shortcuts, they're rewards for efficacy. Aside from the bridge the game forces you to build as part of its tutorial, I never built a single other bridge myself in Death Stranding. On every occasion where a bridge would have come in handy, I'd find one already constructed by some other stranger. And I didn't feel like a cheater for using them. I liked that, because, truth be told,
I didn't think bridges were very interesting. So with bridges a solved problem to me, I was allowed to focus on my own passion, ziplines. These were hard as shit to build, but I established a whole fucking network of them that stretched all around the map. While trivializing most subsequent deliveries, the difficulty was in setting up the series of zipline stations in the first place, and my reward was to be able to use them. I'd proven that I'd mastered this environment, in the same way that whoever was down there building all those bridges for me did too. And just like me, they, if they got tired, were more than welcome to use portions of my zipline network. We all got to benefit from each other's distinct contributions without outright invalidating them. So, these player-made paths don't feel like cheating, because by the time they're fully formed, we've already managed without them. And once one of us proves that it's possible, we all benefit from their contribution. Which is exactly what it felt like being here, at this intersection for the first time in years, seeing a traffic light I didn't know had come to be, controlling the flow of buses, pedestrians, and drivers between this road and a new one that was paved over a dirt shortcut I myself had physically contributed to for years.
Back there is a bus station called Panama, one of the key junction points here on the south shore of Montreal. Normally you'd be able to take a bus here just about anywhere else on the shore, but unfortunately I found myself here consistently very, very late at night. And this bus stop was a lot more sketch back then than it is these days. At this hour, there were 40 to 50 minute wait times between most buses, which were inconsistently listed to say the least. So rather than wait here for a bus that might never even come, it made more sense to just bite the bullet and start a walk, and maybe if I was lucky, catch a bus somewhere along the way.
Now, on paper, the intended path took you out of the bus station onto an adjacent sidewalk for a long way, until finally turning left at this overpass, which, at its other end, is where you'd catch your first chance to pick up some of the other buses. In reality, though, there was a faster way. And next to Panama was a derelict strip mall. Down what used to be a sort of alley along its side, you could get straight into the massive parking lot of this abandoned... well, if you're Canadian, you know exactly what this was. After making it all the way through the parking lot and past the left-behind shopping cart huts, passing behind the old Loblaws' shipping zone, you'd make it to the overpass, but not quite accessibly. At this position, you were almost at the overpass's halfway point, so it was already pretty steep. The only way up was, well, up the side of the very slick, grassy hill. Now, the first time I took this route myself, I wasn't sure whether or not the hill would be safe to climb. I was just tired of the normal, long sidewalk route and was willing to risk an infeasible detour. But to my delight, between a couple of pine trees, I spotted what looked like a rough path. At the very least, evidence of human activity, that I wasn't the first to try this daring climb. And so I no longer had to guess as to whether the barricade at the top of the hill was jumpable. Clearly others have come before, so it must be safe. And so I did it. And that was the start of my new routine. And as I continued, night after night, it kept getting easier. The rough path up the hill between the Loblaws' parking lot and the overpass's barricade became more and more defined, the grass rapidly deteriorating, the earth became firmer, footholds began to form, leaving a scar representing people's desire.
Just like the game, I never actually saw another soul do this. On a couple of occasions I took my friends up this way and I showed them my shortcut, but otherwise I never saw any of the myriad of strangers who evidently worked on this with me, who I shared a common interest with, that of mounting this road and saving ourselves some time. Or maybe it was no one, maybe it was all me. I don't really have a way of knowing, which is weird. But I doubt that, because after years of plotting this course in spite of its difficulty, the city acknowledged it. In paving this new road, Rue Philippines, they'd admitted that yes, the fastest route between the bus station and the overpass is a beeline through the parking lots and up the hill. They canonized this shortcut. That is, what the fuck is that? Did that show up on the fucking... What the fuck is this monster-ass moth, man?
This pavement and the sidewalk that accompanies it makes me feel seen. The walk up has been trivialized, but that's a good thing. It's an easy mode, a reward for years of our collective dedication. Just like Death Stranding, it's like booting up the game to find that its denizens have built a highway where you once walked, leaving no trace behind of the shortcut you contributed to, except for the idea of it. It's like the ultimate confirmation that we were right for taking this path, like we were ahead of the times and the city only now caught up to us. And while I no longer frequent this bus stop myself, it felt good knowing that this literal uphill struggle had been recognized to the point of elimination, that no other late-night transitor would need to know the awkwardness of stumbling up the hill and jumping this fence.
But then, I'm ashamed to say, something changed. This little drop of selfish nostalgia splashed into my brain, and I realized that I was sad over the loss of a fucking footpath. I couldn't put my finger exactly on why right away, but I got to thinking about how this guardrail and the nightly little hop I'd take over it was part of a bigger picture. This maneuver usually kicked off the final stretch in a lengthy series of other shortcuts that took me all the way from downtown Montreal to the remainder of my long way home. And what finally struck me, what I attributed the weird sadness to, was that this wasn't the only thing that had changed. Today, my whole entire route is nearly unrecognizable. Ruthless optimization by businesses and urban planners now funnels people down paths I had made for myself back in the day, and places that once mattered to me, despite my usual dashing through them, have been demolished to accommodate them. I can't go back. Hey, this is a video about Death Stranding, right? Let's go for a little walk.
When I was 17, I worked as a game tester at Electronic Arts, EA, the video game studio. Yes, it was a really fucking cool job for a teenager, but I worked the evening shift, which meant that my way home started with exiting these elevators around 11:45 p.m. every night and rushing through a space that eventually would matter a lot to me. Today, it no longer exists. 2 office buildings have taken over the space, and what was once a small rest area at the outskirt of a shopping center is now a hallway between people's shitty cubicles. Back then, one end housed a Starbucks, the other a Renaud, a French-Canadian bookstore chain, and in the middle, a set of red couches. I only have one piece of evidence of what that looked like. A shitty, blurry, old-school cell phone picture I took one day before starting the weekend shift. A picture I took so that I could explain to my blind date that night where to meet me after work. The place where my now decade-long relationship began is today a hallway between 2 financial businesses. Just shitty, soul-crushing offices. There's no longer an open space here. It's been occupied by private workplaces. On its other end, the hallway leads outside to the corner where... Okay, don't fucking judge me. We were teenagers. Where the Tim Hortons we went to was, because we got lost trying to find the restaurant I had actually planned for us to go to. Sorry. The Timpo's is gone too. It's a fusion restaurant now, and it's not too bad. I had some very good duck there one time. Anyway, the space is just gone. I'm not able to revisit it except for the narrow, lifeless path the workspaces surrounding it have afforded us, and that makes me sad. Down this hallway were a set of outlets. This is part of what Anglos call the Underground City, a complex subterranean networks of shopping centers, food courts, movie theaters, hotels, metro stations, and office buildings. All this covers most of the downtown core. Tourist vloggers like to say that it's like this because Montreal gets so snowy that we need to be indoors to get around. Well, it's true that this does make things easier. It's awfully nice to be able to take off your coat while getting around the city in winter. The real reason is that there was already a natural pit in the earth here. Actually, literally right here. And so they filled it in as the basement of an office that they built above. Now, here's the one spot that's actually added friction to the route. The way the space's designers intended for me to get through here was via this hallway, then around a bend, which is a waste of time. Given there'd be barely a soul here so late at night though, I could cut through a barren food court, which has since become a quote-unquote hipster food court. Gone are the Subway, McDonald's, and Greasy Diner. In are all these trendy boutique restaurants. The gentrification of this food court was part of a $1 billion plan to reinvigorate the downtown core, with its grand opening literal weeks before the COVID lockdown. Point being, this change snuck up on me too. And it's a pain. It's a lot denser than the old one, so it's harder to cut through at speed, and there are a lot of dead ends. But worse, some nights there are events here. I'm told it basically turns into a club for all the office workers upstairs to, get freaky at. And a couple of times, I've seen the place literally locked down, the entrances blocked off with chains and security guards patrolling. So it's no longer consistently available to be walked through, forcing you to take the long way around. Anyway, goal here is to get to this staircase at the other end of the food court, which, while not a desired path itself, shows clear signs of overuse and overfunneling. These steps have been so heavily trafficked over years of rush hours that they formed grooves around the edges, the material slowly stripped away by countless people's rapid descents. When I was younger, you could easily rush down these steps. Now, the slope that's contributed to has made it really, really dangerous. For some reason, this staircase that is critical to so many people's daily routines did not see a cent of that $1 billion investment. This stairwell leads to another food court, and if you've ever seen me tweet a picture of a weird tile that says pain, that's where this comes from. This is a bakery, and pain is just bread in French. but I always stop to giggle at this shit because, it's funny. Past this is Montreal's Grand Central Station, our one actual train station. We'll be back here in a sec, so hold your horses. For now, onward through this other long-ass hallway, down the sketchiest flight of stairs you've ever seen, into another small set of outlets, past the Bonaventure Metro entrance, up these stairs, into Mille de la Gauchetière, Montreal's tallest skyscraper, way at the end past the indoor skating rink, which is fun to take a look at and just cool down in front of, and finally down a flight of stairs to the bus station that takes you off island and towards the South Shore. Except, not anymore. This place is a ghost town. And over the course of filming this, I'm sorry, I just kept getting stopped by random tourists because I was the only English speaker in the vicinity, and people kept asking me for instructions. To the city or to...
Downtown.
I mean, you are downtown.
Oh.
Back in the day, the only way to get out of Montreal at this hour was a bus called the 45. It was this long accordion that was packed every single service. It was a bottleneck. Literally everyone heading south needed to take this bus. There was no alternative, so you'd see a lot of the same faces. Today, though, it's no longer in service. Over the course of the pandemic, another one of Montreal's massive development projects was completed. The REM is an electric, autonomous, above-ground train system built to connect downtown to the now popping Quartier des 30, or, if you're me trying to get directions from my English GPS, the Dix 30. Along the way there, the REM also stops at Panama, my old bus station, and so it's effectively taken over the job of the accordion bus. Just so many of us took this overcrowded bus day in, day out, that they realized, hey, this should probably just be a train, eh? We desired this path so much that they built a robotic train to take us there. This is the most Death Stranding shit I've ever seen. Yet, in optimizing this route, I regret what's been lost. There's no regular nightly bus driver to greet anymore, no rhythmic bumpiness of the bus hitting the old segmented Champlain Bridge. Fuck, oh my god, I almost forgot. The fucking bridge is gone. The old one was torn down, and now we have this massive suspension one. Living on the South Shore, you used to not really know exactly where the bridge was, but now you can't ignore it. It's a permanent fixture on the horizon no matter where you are. The sheer amount of traffic that challenged this path daily, of people who desired to go this exact way, it took its toll on the systems that supported it until the town recognized it and built a new, better road for us. Today, everything along this path has changed, except for, that one staircase. Little did we know back then how much of tomorrow was in our hands, how our combined efforts would shape the landscape.
I was so caught up in this tiny fucking footpath being gone, replaced by something more permanent, that I forgot it was just a speck against the rest of what had changed. A series of mutations stretched over this whole trajectory. What's a sidewalk up a hill after you've taken a robot train across a shiny new bridge, after rushing through a fancy new food court, and after blasting through a dry, dead hallway where no one will ever fall in love again?
I was upset at how much was transformed and sacrificed for the sake of optimization. The more I thought about it, the more I missed these old places and the meaning I'd given them. I felt melancholy, thinking of how those moments will never be relived, that something as taken for granted for as a path I was once accustomed to was no longer recognizable.
And I grew mad at people, the people who now are allowed to benefit from all these little improvements to a route that I used to suffer. I was angry that newcomers wouldn't need to struggle like I did, which was really stupid to think about. My sadness and nostalgia, it turns out, were misattributed jealousy, which is maybe the silliest thing I've let myself get caught in a long time.
In Death Stranding, when new players joined months or years later, many popped into a world whose environment had already been thoroughly conquered by tremendous amounts of ladders, climbing anchors, zip lines, bikes, trucks, masses of other players left behind tools. In the game, I was happy to know that other players could benefit from the work I did, treading all those same paths as me, but having an easier time. The world is unfair, and everyone plays it differently. I'm not jealous of new players getting their easy mode because they didn't just get it, I gave it to them. I passed it on to them. A theme Kojima has been fascinated with throughout his career as a game director is how the world is passed on. Who the fuck says passed on? Hey, the world was passed on, fucking shit. A theme Kojima has been fascinated with throughout his career as a game director is how the world is passed on from generation to generation. He's written about the leaders tackling existential dangers, of sons forced to bear the sins of their fathers, and of bystanders learning what a gift it is to have their freedom fought for. But Kojima is also a massive fucking idiot. See, this elite special operations sniper needs to prance around in her underwear because she breathes from her skin, guys. Don't you get it? She'd suffocate if she wore a goddamn shirt, let alone pants. See, he's not just a perv, he has a very reasonable excuse. Guys, this man can do no wrong. He has a blank check from Sony and enough photogrammetry gear to scan every woman's feet in a 30-mile radius.
Wow. I actually remember I had to... They asked to scan my, it's so strange. Like underneath my feet for a reference when I was at Kojima Productions.
And nowhere has Kojima demonstrated the boundlessness of his asshattery better than with Death Stranding. I thought I was dumb to let nostalgia make me resistant to change, but this guy's got me beat, and I have the receipts to prove it. At the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, Jack, the character you've been guiding through this whole fiasco, is told by Solid Snake, his hero, and also yours, not just by proxy, but because he was the protagonist of the first game. Anyway, Jack/you are told that the rest of your life is yours to do with as you please. Jack is reminded of the freedoms in this new era, the new millennia, afforded to him by the previous generation, and he's encouraged to take back control of his life from those who've commandeered it. Understanding what he's told, Jack rips off the dog tags he's been wearing since the beginning of the game. Not his own, but yours, the ones stamped with your PlayStation ID. Snake and Kojima help him understand that the way has been paved for him, and that he's free to explore his life independently. He takes control back over himself, and the player reflects on all this while the credits roll. The lesson being not to bind yourself to fate, not to let others determine who you are, and to look back at the gifts left behind by previous generations. A metaphor, many believe, for a director who desperately wanted to distance himself from his name-making series after the supposed final entry. Almost 20 years later, finally getting to work on his first new IP in decades, this same director showed and told us all about social interconnectedness, about rebuilding the world after a disaster. He put us in the shoes of a glorified mailman asynchronously collaborating with other glorified mailmen to reconnect disparate communities, rebuilding America and uncovering the value of cooperation along the way. So, if you've been paying attention to this man's work, the image he projects of himself is pretty clear. These two themes, distanced by decades of his career, still jive. Be free and work together. Don't let yourself be controlled or let others tell you what you can or can't do. But make sure not to be selfish, right? The world isn't yours alone. You share it today with billions of other people and with infinitely many to come in future generations. Consider them and your responsibility unto them with all actions you take in life. So then why in the ever-living fuck did he patent the heat map system? Good people of the jury, I present to you Exhibit A, Kojima's fucking dirt road patent. Did he not comprehend his own art? Or worse, did he not believe his own message? This man coined the term strand-type game, patted himself on the back, and then tried to lock down the intellectual property rights to it as if it was the hottest new thing that everyone would be trying to rip off. Man is the most resistant to change, egotistical motherfucker I've ever heard of, and I'm tired of people sucking from his proverbial teat like what he's got is the sweetest shit. Friends, family, sit down for a second and admit that his milk is sour. In truth, it goes much further than just the desire paths. Kojima holds a US patent covering basically every single one of Death Stranding's core mechanics, some of which have existed in games long before he thinks he invented them. He snagged the concepts of shared worlds where events ripple between player instances, of messages that left by one player appear in the world of another, of environment scanners that map nearby obstacles in real time. His patent even goes into how weight is distributed along the spine of his virtual Norman Reedus. And he's got maybe the crustiest Microsoft Paint PS4 controller I've ever seen. I hope he drew this himself. Not only does this prophetic auteur own the legal right to the idea of paths becoming more defined the more players traverse them in an online video game, but he's called dibs on so much of this shit that no other developer can safely make anything ever again about walking without risking a lawsuit from Mr. Bright Ideas over here, Mr. fucking she wears a bikini because she breathes through her skin, Mr. oh, he's not a vampire, he's just bisexual.
That was how he acquired a taste for blood. So that's why they call him Vamp. No, Vamp isn't for vampire, it's because he's bisexual.
I still don't understand that one. The point here, it's ironic to exert a legal claim over systems built to help players share a gameplay experience, especially after wailing for years about passing things on to the next generation and for them to have the freedom to explore.
We've inherited freedom from all those who fought for it. We all have the freedom to spread the word.
I think I found something to pass along to the future.
What?
He said all living things want their genes to live on. There are too many things that aren't written into our DNA.
What kind of things?
About the environment, our ideas, our culture, poetry, compassion. We'll tell them everything together.
Death Stranding is all about sharing. Players share a world state, they collaborate on paths together, they expose resources to one another, leave gifts for strangers to find. Yet, the designer of these systems, Kojima, is not willing to share any of them himself. Nope, nobody but him is allowed to innovate any further on any of the concepts here, which is a damn shame, because Kojima's view on innovation these days seems to be less about making games that are increasingly complex and fun, and more about plugging in as many cameos of his new Hollywood buddies as he can. Like, it's silly to resent the development of a road that you thought you had invented, because it just confirms what you already know, that it's a good idea to go up the hill this way. It's not your world alone. You're not the only one going up this hill. This is a shared place where things are allowed to change and progress, even if they don't benefit you directly. A road's overlaying over an old trodden path doesn't erase it. If anything, it entrenches it further into the quote-unquote canon. So allowing other developers to explore his ideas wouldn't invalidate Death Stranding. I mean, fuck, just look at Dark Souls and the myriad of worthwhile projects it's inspired. Objectively, we'd be in a much shittier world if FromSoft had patented every single one of their systems and mechanics. Case in point, Death Stranding wouldn't have existed, at least not without a license or a lawsuit. Death Stranding is still a really important experience, both because it pioneered some really cool concepts, but also because of the state of the world upon its release. The dissonance, though, between its author's treatment of it versus the message it's trying to get across, that collaboration and teamwork are humanity's most powerful tools to combat isolation, is disappointing. In spite of his own themes, Kojima chose to isolate himself and hold these ideas hostage from the rest of the world. In his very narrow view, he's the only one worthy of iterating any more on these. Kojima's heart, or maybe his brain structure, has clearly changed over the course of his career. He no longer has room for his old ideals. Now he's just trying to secure his little piece of the pie. I don't think Kojima's out of good ideas, but I don't think he knows how to execute them anymore. At least not without exposing his whole massive ass. It's very unfortunate that the potential to see these ideas expanded or iterated upon by others has been legally limited by the very man who introduced them. If only there were a way to see what a version of Death Stranding would look like, having been handed off to be completed by others. What the game could have been had Kojima not been involved directly. Someone else's interpretation of his themes, of traveling through an always online post-apocalyptic wasteland where the dead have been resurrected, transporting supplies and powering complex machines with crystalline energy sources, all the while avoiding terrifying entities plucked straight from the darkest possible cosmic nightmares. So anyway, I'm going to be writing a little bit about Metal Gear Survive next, and I hope you come back for that. I'll be flying my drone over Zanzibar land for that one. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring-a-ding-ding that bell if you think aliens are real, and say hi to the devil in hell for me when you meet him. Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you so much for watching this fucking video about dirt roads. I spent hundreds of dollars filming dirt roads to make this video a reality. I hope anything. I was thinking at this point to like shill my Patreon a little bit with a specific project. So I don't think I've ever done like an exclusive fucking project on that thing. But I was thinking about doing this thing because I did film a lot of like really interesting desire paths, and it was a really fun process to, number one, find them, and number two, document them and film them, some of them with the drone. There was one in particular that I was really pissed because its proximity to power lines and an airport unfortunately meant that I could not safely fly or responsibly fly a drone over over it. Remember, drones are not toys. They can cause a lot of damage if you're not careful. But I ended up finding a way to use it in the video, so now I don't feel bad about not being able to show it. I didn't drone shoot it. It was the one on the railways. I don't know if you remember. It showed up for like 2 seconds in the video. But like the clip I did really didn't do it justice. Anyways, I was thinking like last time I said, I think for the suck up video, I said if like one person asks, I'll put a readme for like the project that I mentioned there. I ended up doing that, and then like the one guy who asked never got back to me. So this time I'll say if 2 people ask me for like a full rundown of all the different desire paths I filmed, I will happily make a Patreon exclusive thing where I basically go through all the different desire paths, walk into the history of like how I discovered them, what the deal was with them, the process of filming them, and just give you some behind the scenes bullshit. But once again, that would require at least 2 people to show genuine interest in that. If nobody's interested in that, then I guess I'll go fuck myself. Anyways, see you around, and have a nice time.